The world is waking up, and you finding your way here today is no coincidence. The spirit world always has a way of guiding us where we most need to be at the absolute perfect time. I'm your host, Lindsay Morlock, and you're listening to the Guided Podcast, where we explore how the spirit world works on our behalf to guide us along our paths. This is where you'll learn how to live a life that is both conscious and connected, so you can supercharge your pathway to healing and open to life's magic and miracles. Come along this journey to see how guided you truly are. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of Guided. Today, I am so excited to introduce you to Catherine Ann. Catherine is an intuitive channel and messenger for spirit who connects with her clients' energy to provide intuitive insights and practical next steps. Catherine has been a lifelong seeker whose insatiable desire to understand all things esoteric has led to a vast range of studies, including tarot, astrology, the Akashic records, and more. She uses clairvoyant, clairaudient, and clairsentient abilities to offer guidance to her clients, encouraging them to move in a positive direction and face the challenges that might lie ahead of them. Catherine Ann enters each session with the knowingness that spirit will come through in just the perfect way that is in the highest good for all, whether it is connecting people with their guides or past loved ones, channeling galactic messages of love and support, or connecting clients with the teachings of other spiritual teachers. Catherine's greatest joy is spreading spirit's messages of love and helping each person believe in their own unique ability to connect to spirit. So Catherine, thank you so much for being here today and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm really excited to be here.
So I just want to dive right in with you, and I would love for you to start by telling the audience about your awakening story. You know, how did your spiritual journey unfold and how did you come in to your intuitive gifts?
Well, it's a kind of a long story because it really has been my whole life, although I didn't really know it. So in retrospect now, I can see that I had experiences all the way in childhood. I had mediumship experiences. I had intuitive experiences. I just had no frame of reference for them because it was in no way something that was discussed in my family. Neither pro nor con. It just wasn't a thing. So I had no frame of reference. I have a stellium in Scorpio, so I am super into all things esoteric. And even as a child, I was the one buying the birthday books to learn about my birthday. And, you know, like the little kid who knew I was a Scorpio, even though that wasn't something that was talked about in my family at all. Always really fascinated by the idea of psychics. You know, wow, wouldn't that be cool? So that started from really, really young. And then at some point in college, I had a roommate that did tarot and I was gifted a tarot deck. And that really started my exploration of actually doing something with divination. And I have a love for tarot. I just am obsessed with it.
Can you dive into that for a second? Like share with the audience what tarot is, and we'll come back because some people I think have a little bit of fear around tarot because I think there's a lot of myths out there about it. So it might be helpful if you just share a little bit about that too.
Sure. So it's funny because people always ask me how I learned tarot. And at some point in my early 20s, I decided I'm going to be very methodical about this. And I thought I'm going to pick a card a day and read about it, see what happens during that day. And at night, I'm going to journal and make the correlations. So, you know, traditional tarot has the major arcana, which is the set of, I think it's 22. And then the minor arcana, which has the 4 different suits, the cup, the pentacles, the sword, and I'm missing one, and the wands. And they correlate to all sorts of things. They correlate to the elements. They correlate to, emotion and mind and body and spirit. They have all these different correlations. They have astrological correlations. It's basically like a language. And I actually recently made this connection that growing up, my dad played cards. He played cribbage all the time. He played gin rummy all the time. I was always playing cards with him. And I feel like that was a little bit part of my initiation into this love affair with cards. You know, I can shuffle like nobody's business. I just love them. So in my early 20s, I thought, this is cool. I don't really understand it, but I think it's interesting. So I'm going to teach myself. And so I did. And there's, I think 72 cards. So that was kind of a process of one by one learning. And then I just played around with my friends. And there are prescribed definition to the tarot cards. And at that time, I just learned them. I have a good memory. I have a good mind for puzzles. It all just kind of made sense to me. And so I would do them for fun with my friends. I happened to go get a reading by somebody when I was in a holding pattern where I had quit a job and I was waiting for a visa to go move back to Costa Rica. And I went and got a reading, actually a tea leaf reading. And the woman said, "Why are you here?" And I'm like, "Oh, because this is fun, right?" And she's like, "No, you do this. Like, you literally can do this." And I'm like, "Oh, no. I just play around with my friends." Like, no. And she said, "Okay, so tomorrow you're going to go to this bookstore and you're going to ask for the manager and he's going to give you a job and you're going to start working." And I did. So terrified, but I didn't have anything else to do anyways, because I was waiting for this visa to come through. And I figured, well, whenever this comes through, I'm out of here anyways. And like, really? He doesn't even know me. He's going to give me a job reading cards? Like, what? And he was like, "If Margie sent you, you're real. So here we go." And I did it.
That's wild.
It was wild. And during that experience, I really just, there's spreads you do. So I kind of just studied. And when I wasn't giving readings, I was just sitting there in this bookshop consuming information, reading astrology books and reading tarot books and just like loving kind of my immersive experience.
I'm gonna say that's pretty amazing that you get paid to like dive into your stellium and Scorpio, right? Like to get into all of those esoteric things.
It was amazing. And so there's this phrase I've always used my whole life, which is, the universe just opens a door for me and I walk through. I've done all sorts of different things. I've had different careers. I've had lots of really great experiences, and other people in my life kind of go, "What is she doing now? Like, seriously?" But that's how I've always described it, is the universe just opens a door for me and I go, "Okay, I'll walk through. It feels right. I'm going to walk through." And I feel like that's kind of what happened with that. I had my first very clear mediumship experience during that time where someone came to me and their son, came through. I didn't even know what was happening, but I just, said what he was telling me. And then I got my visa and I moved back to Costa Rica. And I was like, okay, that was that. But, it really is the thing of spirit opens a door and I walk through it, because then I met people there. And next thing I know, I'm doing a month-long meditation in Guatemala, learning crystal therapy. And then I come back from my time in Costa Rica and Guatemala with like, what am I going to do with my life? And so I go, well, maybe I'll go to massage school so I can do crystal therapy, because at the time I needed a massage license to be able to do body work. And it's just kind of been like that. Like, okay, now I did this and now I did that. And I didn't go back. Well, I did go back for a little bit to that bookshop because I was like, oh, I need a job. I honestly intuitively knew I was not supposed to. And I did it anyways. It didn't end well. I had, an experience where I was like, and I'm out of here. But always kind of loved still working with the cards. And from one thing led to another. Then I met someone who did aromatherapy, and through the aromatherapy, then she introduced me to her meditation teacher, who I ended up working with for like 20 years, learning how to do chakra readings. And so that's always just been a thread for me. I've always just kind of followed that next step, very much so fascinated with this idea of being able to connect with energy, with the other side, with just that idea of almost like being psychic, always really fascinated me. And so I just kind of kept following that. And now where I am now, I realize I had this big epiphany actually a few weeks ago at our retreat, that was the difference between being spiritual, practicing learning your intuitive gifts, and being conscious. So that's put a whole new layer on everything now.
So let me pause you right there, because that's such a good piece of awareness. So talk to people about what that means for you. Like, what awareness did you arrive at about the difference and intersection of those three things?
Yeah. So it really starts, when I'm thinking about like my awakening journey, my conscious awakening started in 2020. This is after 20 plus 30 years of, having intuitive moments and prophetic dreams, and just like naturally having an intuitive gift and not really knowing what to do about it. just being interested. But in 2020, I met a mentor that helped me on this whole other journey. And I had set an intention earlier, about 6 months earlier, of I wanted to learn to channel. I just was like, I want to channel. What do I have to do? So I had started this journey. She came into my life, and through my work with her, I learned to process my emotions. I learned the importance of building a relationship with spirit. I started to really understand why it's called a practice. It's a meditative practice. It's all of these divination tools that I had learned, they're all practices. And what I really came to understand is the reason they're practices is because you have to practice. You have to set the time, set the intention, be diligent, and do the work. And it's not always butterflies and rainbows. Some of that work is really diving deep into the stuff that you have hidden from yourself for a long time. I'm amazing at compartmentalizing. I have spent much of my life stuffing my emotions. And through this process of learning how to process my emotions, learning how to really confront what I'm dealing with, and engaging in that's where I've started to understand the difference between consciousness and playing with divination.
Yeah, it's such an important point, right? Because there are people who are spiritual. There are people, but they're not conscious. There are people who are conscious, but not at all spiritual. And then you have a whole other, sect of people that are both conscious and spiritual. And that has always been the intention of this podcast, being how are we connecting and conscious, right? And connecting or bridging the gap between consciousness and being spiritual in order to because that's what supercharges the pathway to healing, in my opinion, right? That's when I've seen the greatest shifts, is when we use the tools and, like you're saying, the practice to really support the evolution of our own consciousness and our healing.
100%. What I really have come to understand is that through this process over the last 3 years where I've really, it's not been about look what I can do, which is kind of before was the approach. It was like, oh, look, I can read cards. Oh, look, I can, do chakra clearings. Even from myself, I wasn't understanding that deeper connection and relationship with spirit that takes it to a completely different place.
Spirit flashes me too. That disclaimer on some of the contracts when you get a tarot reader for a party where it's for entertainment purposes only. It's the difference between for entertainment purposes only and using it as a tool to support your evolution, right? And the intention with which we use it is everything.
100%. And, now I do understand what the cards mean. Most of them I have in my brain of the traditional meanings, but I don't read them that way at all anymore. It's completely intuitive. It's completely channeled. I don't follow any particular spread. I do whatever I hear spirit asking me to do. I mix tarot and oracle cards and just whatever. And then I automatic write it or I record it because it's what's coming out of my mouth is what spirit is providing for me.
Yeah.
And I could have the same 5 cards laid out one day and another day. It's going to be a completely different message based off of what the symbols and the pictures and the colors trigger in me. That's the message for the day. And that developed really because I went through this process of learning how to be me and learning how, for entertainment purposes is such a perfect way to explain it, because there's the going through the motions and then there's being a messenger for spirit. And that is what I think the difference has been over my awakening process, is really coming into that conscious understanding that this is an opportunity to be a messenger for spirit.
Yeah. And it's an unfolding, right? You can see and you can hear an evolution in your story of how you arrived at these places. One of the things that really struck me was how you taught yourself tarot, with sitting with a card, really getting the message for the day and then connecting the dots at the end of the day. It almost feels like you were remembering how to do this from another time in, another lifetime, so to speak. But the other thing that you're pointing out that I can so resonate with is that's when I got certified as a hand analyst. I did it because it was something I could learn with my mind. There was a scientific component of it. And over time, now my readings, yes, I pull in the scientific knowledge, but it is so intuitively driven. Where is my eye being pulled towards a marking or you're really being called to talk about this. And I think, it's important for people to hear that we're all backing into our divinity in different ways, right? And because to your point, you can be playing with all the tools for 25 years and in a 3-year period, I never in a million years would have guessed that you only really started the awakening of the consciousness piece 3 years ago, because the amount of consciousness you exude is beyond. So that just goes to show you, like, the supercharged pathway, when you connect, right? The consciousness and spirituality, it's magical.
It's absolutely magical. And, I've been thinking a lot about my awakening journey. And the phrase that I keep getting, that Spirit keeps giving me, is the worst kept secret. And so I thought nobody knew. This was my own little thing that I did. And oh yeah, like 20 years ago, I read in the bookstore. I was living with my mom at the time, didn't even tell her what I was doing. I
funny.
did it because I was afraid of the judgment. And in everything I've done, it's always been something that I didn't explicitly talk about. And in the last few years, when I got in touch with, like, this is me and this is who I am, and I started just expressing that, it's been such a game changer. I mean, I went from, I wanted to literally move to another state so that I could be the person I wanted to be, where nobody would know me, so I could just read cards and channel and do all the stuff I do and not have to feel that judgment, to starting to express out in the world, just in my everyday life. I'm obsessed with astrology. Yes, I do readings, like all the stuff, right? And it's been amazing because I've actually been able to really see how Spirit is using me in that capacity to introduce these concepts to other people. And now I don't feel this need to disappear and run to some other place to be me. I'm just able to be me. And one of the things that I feel like is, I don't know if I would say it's my gift or it's my purpose, but I really feel like Spirit uses me to connect the dots for people. And, like I mentioned before, it's been a lifelong seeker. I've studied so much stuff. I consume so much content. Like I'm studying astrology and I'm studying numerology, and the stuff, I've done it all. I read the Akashic records. I mean, it's just kind of like, I can't get enough, but I really think it's because Spirit will nudge me what a person needs, and then I can share that. And it's different for everybody. So, for some people, I'll get a nudge of a song and I'll send them a song and I'll just say, I just felt like you needed to hear this today. And that's the nudge, right?
Yeah.
For others, they're asking me, like, so what does it mean when I see 333 everywhere? It's kind of, everyone has their language. Everyone has their thing that they connect with. And I feel like that's maybe why this journey has been so long for me, until it kind of all came out, was I was gathering.
Yeah.
As my my mentor told me, you're putting more tools in your basket.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of why, is because I really feel like part of what I'm supposed to be doing is connecting the dots for people to start them on their path, or to what's the next step of their path. Like if I'm, doing an Akashic records reading for somebody, oftentimes that's what I'm given, is like, okay, so here's the next thing I want you to follow. Like, go check out this teacher, or have you ever thought about doing this? And so it's a lot more fun now.
Yeah. And I think this is, no matter what people are doing, what walk of life they're in, right? I think we all wear masks. I think so many people can probably relate to where we stuff or compromise our authenticity and who we really are, because we're fearing that potential reaction, rejection, judgment. And this has been such a, like you said, growing up, nobody talked about this. And so there was, and I think now it's becoming so much more mainstream, or maybe that's just my perception because I surround myself with people who are doing this all day, every day, and don't really, socialize with much beyond that. So bias here, but I think we struggled with hiding out and containing our light, because it's not that it wasn't there, but I think we contain it, and we have played small, and we have held back for wanting to make other people feel more comfortable at the expense of our own integrity. And I think the more consciousness that we embody, and it becomes harder and harder not to stay in your own integrity. And I don't know if this has been your experience, but my experience is like, people are looking for permission to be who they are. And when you just show up as you are for your most real, unique, authentic, individualistic self, you give everybody else permission to show up the exact same way. And those are the moments that you realize, oh, people are actually into this stuff. They are interested in it, but someone's got to make the first move, right?
Absolutely. And, I just think like in my day job, when I kind of started opening up little by little to people about this other part of my being, basically, and all of a sudden it's just such a more comfortable way to live and it's really exciting. I agree with you that it could be that I just choose to surround myself with people who are more open, but because I think you attract that, right?
Yeah.
But also it's I was listening to something the other day and they were talking about even like on the news, they'll be like, oh, I'm channeling so-and-so now. Like it's in the daily language now, some of these concepts. And that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's really freeing. And although, it's taken me a lot of courage to say, yeah, I connect with a galactic council and share their message. Like, what? That's been a big thing for me to do that. But at the same time, it's exactly what you said, where I just couldn't not anymore.
Yeah.
It felt like not only are the things that I'm hearing, they need to be shared because they're messages of love, but also it's just, it's kind of, again, that thing of like spirit opens a door and I walk through. Like part of the time I walk through because it's uncomfortable not to. And that's kind of where I'm at with this now, is that it's uncomfortable not to be expressing this whole part of me. It's weird to even say part of me because it's who I am.
But we hide it, right? Like we hide from ourselves. You and I were talking a little bit earlier before the show about how we hide from ourselves, right? And what a cosmic joke that really is.
Yeah, we were talking about, I recently got the message to really go deeper, really look around that deep, dark corner in that cave that I've been hiding from myself. And so I did, and I sat with spirit and I went in and I'm like, okay, I'm ready. And I'm seeing myself like turn around the corner in this deep, dark cave, being very nervous at what I was going to find. Being afraid that I was going to find something scary or some hidden memory that I didn't want to uncover. I don't know. I just, my ego made it into a whole bunch of stuff. And what I found was my light. When I went around that corner, I saw this beautiful, brilliant light. And it was like, this is what you've been hiding from yourself. And, like, what a shame.
Yeah.
Don't hide your light. And also, it wasn't scary.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was doing something similar recently. I was in a meditation and I asked spirit to kind of show me a mental movie of potentials for my life. And because I was in a place of wanting to get clear about my own dreams and desires. And when they showed me one particular dream, I just started crying because I felt the truth of it, but it also felt so massive at the same time that I'm like, this is why we hide from our light. Because when we really see the expansiveness and massiveness of our potential, it's like, oh, let me just go back inside. Let me pretend I did not see that right there. But we can't deny it. Like your soul just has a knowing where it's supposed to go and what it is here to ultimately express. And it's not a guarantee that we're going to step into that, but it is a shame to not head in that direction because it feels so good the more and more we step into it. And as you were talking, I was thinking about, people we're conditioned in this culture to work hard in our jobs, at our careers, in relationships, but we're not taught to work hard on ourselves. Like that has been something I've always been drawn to, that I've always been committed to working on myself. But when we think about why more people aren't doing the work, it's like everybody's focused on working hard externally for things. I mean, relationships might, involve some inner work, but there is this hiding from the self and not wanting to look at what we're going to find behind these potentially dark corners.
Absolutely. And I think that really marks why there's a difference between what I did over the last 30-ish years and the last 3 years. Because I went through a really painful divorce divorce. And it was a dark night of the soul for me. It was, I have to look at this. It was just non-negotiable. It was, I have to look at what I need to be shown. I don't even know if I can verbalize what I had to look at. I just knew I did.
Yeah.
And thankfully found the teacher to help me do that. And I was absolutely committed and still am absolutely committed to doing this work of looking at myself, because that's what's made all the difference. I mean, I just physically, yes, things have changed in my life. You know, I have come out the other side in such wonderful and miraculous ways. And that's true. Like, I have a physical representation of how this work has supported me, but that doesn't even scratch the surface for internally how much better my life is, because I've chosen to, you know, really look at myself and do the work.
So can you go deeper with some of that and just share with people, like, what might some of those takeaways be in terms of when you make those inner shifts? How is that then reflected in an external capacity and inner capacity? Because I know you feel differently too.
Yeah. You know, so it's so funny because the story that's coming up for me with this is, so when I was going through the most painful part of my divorce, I was listening a lot to Abraham Hicks. And one of the messages is about people literally disappearing from your life when they no longer are in your vibration.
Vibrate out of your experience, right?
Yes. And I had a thought about how I would want that to happen with my ex, like physically, right? Because it was painful. I'm very clear now. We have a very karmic tie, and he's a huge teacher for me. Anyways, so through the course of the work, fast forward a year later, I'm on a retreat in Mount Shasta, doing deep work, I never say it right, but it's like the Ho'oponopono prayer, and doing a lot of deep work with that week, and had this really cathartic experience around our relationship and him. Since that, and I come out of that going, I don't even care anymore. I just want it to be easy. I just want peace, grace, and easiness in this situation. And from there, what has developed is honestly a good friendship. I would have never believed it. Never. I mean,
amazing.
Never would have believed it. And so when I think about the idea of when a person no longer vibrates with you, they're out of your life, you know, they'll vibrate out of your life. And what I think happened is that element has vibrated out of my life. I don't experience that person anymore because my vibration completely changed. And so the part that resonates together now is in a good place. And that's amazing. I can't explain it. I mean, the shift it's made for me, for my kids, for everything, to have, you know, looked at how I contributed to that, looked at learning that I'm codependent. Wow, that was big.
Yeah.
And how codependent is actually a lot of manipulation, and having to address all of that, and learning how I did that not only in that relationship, but in all my relationships. So doing that work made a completely different trajectory, I feel like, for me and for my kids, from what it could have been if I would have stayed in the place of bitterness and resentment. And so I like, that was emotional work that has completely changed my daily life and the experience of my kids.
It sounds like you connected into the purposefulness of the experience, right? Like, there's a place where I think where a lot of people get stuck sometimes is because they don't lean into the emotion, and they get stuck in the hurt, in the pain, and they stay there. They hang on to it for years, and nothing can change when we're not allowing ourselves to feel the emotions to allow them to change. And so I always remember Spirit talking to me about sadness. And it was like, if you're not willing to feel the sadness, it can't change. And that's what we do when we suppress, repress, avoid our emotions in any way, shape, or form. And when we lean into them and we understand the messages of the emotions, it is life-changing, because we can then learn and evolve to a place where we don't need to keep attracting in the same energies to keep playing out these lessons. We learn, and then we evolve to the next level and layer. I mean, there's no final destination, but it's so much more enjoyable to have a process around how to move through these trials and tribulations, right? And then be able to connect with the purposefulness of it and like what a difference it's made in your life.
It's made a huge difference. And I think that that's also what's made such a huge difference in my spiritual growth, because through this process, I now have cultivated a relationship with my spiritual team. It's not, oh, look at these cool intuitive things, these games, like playing with cards or whatever. It's, oh my gosh, I'm going through this. I need to sit and talk with them. I need to like show me what I need to know about this situation. And, sometimes it's through meditation. Sometimes I go into my own Akashic records. Sometimes I do cards. I use my pendulum to ask, like, how are you going to talk to me today?
Right.
What do I need to do? But it's in developing that connection with my own team, my own guidance, that has made all the difference. Because not only has it made a difference just in my daily life, I now understand that they walk with me in everything I do. And so I use that. Like help, is this a good time to go run that errand? Is this, like help me write this, get myself into the right frame of mind to have a conversation with somebody. It's all part of their supporting me in this learning and growing. And I feel like, to kind of circle back to when I work with people, whether specifically in a session or just in my daily life, that's like the message of support I can give, right? Is like, hey, you have this team, and if you're willing to go there with them, it can be magical beyond what you expect.
It's a process to develop, that relationship, but you're right. It's a relationship. I think that's the thing I had to learn, is that your relationship with spirit is like any other relationship in your life. The only difference is that they're non-physical. So you can't actually, some people might actually be able to physically see them, but in general, right, they're vibrating at a different frequency that is not at the same frequency as human beings and, the earth plane. And so I think that can throw people, right? Like it's harder to have a relationship with someone or something that you feel like you can't see, but you can feel it. And you're right. We have an option to walk through our lives being connected to this every single moment of every single day. And they really will hold our hands the whole way. If we ask for help, if we bring them in, if we connect with them, if we allow them to do it. And it's like everything you learned, your 25, 30 years of tools for that toolbox are all supporting you developing your relationship with spirit and that relationship with yourself. And that's what I love about it too, right? It's like it was all preparing you for this moment of big breakthrough consciousness. But at the same time, like that's what I think, sometimes people go out in search of these modalities. They're like, I need a side hustle. I need a business. So I'm going to go get certified in something because then I can offer it as a service. And there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. But I know even for me, and it sounds like for you too, everything that I've done because I did it because I was looking to help myself. And then I felt so amazed or inspired by the changes I found within myself that I was like, oh my gosh, I need to do this for others. But it all started because I was trying to help myself.
Yeah. And I think for me, actually, all of this journey has been for me to convince myself it's really happening.
That's real. I'm sure other people can totally relate to that because there is a healthy level of skepticism that many of us have around this.
Oh, yeah. And same, like I used to think like I'm supposed to see my guides. People would talk about their guides and I'm like, so do they walk through the door? Like, I don't get it. And I'm actually super clairvoyant. I'm very, very visual and I mostly feel them. I don't, I do have this one new guide that came in that always dances in front of my face. So, I do see that it's like he's trying to get me to lighten up.
Yeah. I was going to say that's fun. Sounds fun.
It's fun. But I don't see him. I see him in my mind's eye. Right. But, one of the really, it's all the connecting the dots. Right. And, I love it. I've taught my kids about angel numbers. And so we see them every day, all the time, nonstop. And it's too much for me to remember the meanings of all of them. And they mean something different at different times. And I kind of feel like that way, like I'd mentioned before with the tarot, right? right? Like I could see the same card 2 different days in a row. It's going to mean something different. So I had learned from Kyle Gray, who is, like an angel whisperer, to say like, thank you for reminding me of your presence. So that's simple enough. You don't even have to understand. All you keep doing is saying, thank you for reminding me you're with me. I think that's been a fundamental game changer for me, to just keep acknowledging you're with me, you're with me, you're with me. And, I do know that 555 often represents transformation, which I see quite regularly.
I can't even believe you just said that, because this morning, I got up super early and I happened to look at the stove and it was like 555. And I said to Spirit, oh, right, I need you to help me remember what that means. And you literally unbelievable. This is how it works though, right? Like
this is how it works. And it's actually a joke with my daughter right now, because she'll be like, are you kidding me? There's another 555. It's been nonstop for the last couple months for me, which before it wasn't, it was other numbers. And so for a while there, I was going like, oh gosh, what change is coming now? Like a little bit of nervousness. And then I went, I need to reframe this, right? So now I say, thank you for supporting me through this transformation. I don't know what the transformation is. I just know there's transformational energy around. And because I'm so into astrology, I know that astrologically there's big shifts, right? There's, all the changes with Pluto and Saturn, and it can go on and on. There's transformation in the stars. But to just keep reminding myself like, hey, you're with me. Thank you for supporting me through whatever this crazy transformation is going to be. I have no doubt it is in my highest good. And I appreciate you there for the ride with me, right?
Yeah. Well, and one thing that's striking me as you're talking about your story and like just taking the next right step, it seems like you have a nice relationship with surrender, or at least that's my perception of it. Like surrender and trusting. And we talked a little bit about the skepticism, but I am somebody that struggles with surrender. That was something in my own codependence that I really have to look at, is like how I try to hold on to control when I am in fear or when right? And trying to make things happen. And that extends in my relationship with spirit, right? It's like when we want to know how things are going to unfold, that is a form of control, right? Like and so I'm learning my own lessons about surrender, but like when you're willing to just take the next right step and like wait for the door to open and walk through it, that takes surrender.
I think that's so lovely that you say that, because I would definitely call myself a control person.
So maybe that's evolving. Maybe I'm seeing
it's evolved. It's interesting because it is evolving. And I would say that I've gotten much better at it, but also it's funny because I've also had this validated in my astrology, my birth chart, when I've had readings, that I have this sense of things coming. Like I don't know what it is, but I can feel change way early, like even years early, like way early. So I think that by the time I get there, I've already had this feeling of like change. Something was coming.
Yeah, so you're ready for it.
So yeah, it's like, okay, here we go. Doesn't mean I don't get nervous about it, but I think that's part of it, is that just like I was saying, I've been seeing the 555 for months. That's transformation. And I've also come to understand that sometimes that transformation is internal and nothing in your physical world is about to come crashing down. It's just a big epiphany or whatever that may then lead to physical change, because it's always like within first. But especially over the last few years, that surrender has gotten easier.
I love that. It's funny too. I'm chuckling because as you just talked about transformation, I just want to show people how spirit works through others to get you the information that you need. Because last night I literally pulled a card that talked all about how things are not as they seem on the surface. There is transformation happening internally that is naked to the eye. And you literally just said that. So I'm over here chuckling as you're talking about surrendering, because you're quite literally surrendering to the information spirit is bringing through to you. And that is a message for me. And I want to reassure people, right? Like you're going to get the messages always, right? Like I did not have time this morning to pull up my phone and Google 555. And now I'm so grateful that I don't have to, because I was going to have to do that later. But now Catherine just gave me the whole message. And this is how spirit works, right? Like, and this is where kind of a full circle moment where you're coming back to all of the tools that you developed And yes, for yourself, but also so you could bring through messages for other people at the same time, right? And like spirit is working through every single one of us in that way to help one another. And so the more, I think, coming back to, learning how to process your emotions and how to work with spirit, like this is really what carries us forward in our lives with so much more grace and ease, because when we can really understand what is our responsibility to heal and to own and to change, we only have to worry about how we show up and do our best in relationship with other people. But there's so much more power in the knowing, I think, that all we need to focus is on healing ourselves as a way of healing the world.
That has been such a theme for me this month. Oh my goodness. Especially the part about I have to take responsibility for how I show up. I have to take responsibility for processing my emotions, doing my work, not putting my head in the sand when something's hard or scary. And there's to a point, right? Like that's something I've really learned is that I can't heal others. That's not my job. My job is to maybe give the nudge, share just in conversation, share what spirit is hoping to bring out, and everyone gets to take accountability for their own healing. And that's been a really big message for me this month in general, is that, and even when I want to just turn it back on myself and sit with it again, or pull cards again or something, because it's about me. It's not about them.
Right. It's funny. That has been such a theme for me. Like it's always coming back to me. It's always coming back to me. And it's funny because I think one of the things, I don't know if you feel this way, but one of the things I have challenges with communication, which I've recently been told people are surprised by because they hear me on, say, a podcast and they're like, you do not have communication challenges, but I do have trouble expressing myself. And I do withhold expressing my emotions. That is a big piece of my lesson here. And it's interesting because I can convince myself not to communicate with other people because, and this might be an ego upgrade, but I convince myself that I'm like, well, it always is about me. It's not about, if I'm pointing the finger at someone else, it is not about them. It is about me. And when you know that, and it is true, right? So you can almost, I'm like, I don't know if this is a form of gaslighting myself, but it's interesting, right? Because it's like we end up on this spiritual path, I think, on some level being like, well, I actually don't need to communicate with anyone because it's always about me. And I'm just going to really go inward, focus on what I need to understand, what I need to heal. And then I don't need to tell anyone anything, which is, by the way, not the right answer, but
so true though. So true, because especially in this last month, as I've been going through stuff, there's been times where I've done that, had that exact conversation in my head. I had those of us with those strong analytical minds can really convince ourselves. And that's where, thank God, I have processes. I've built a relationship with my spiritual team. I have mentors and I have people who will call me out. Like that's, thank goodness, because it's same. I could 100% be like, well, I don't need to address this. I'm just going to do it all internal.
Yes. Case in point. Yep.
Right? We don't live in a bubble. And yes, we do have to do the inner work, but we do the inner work in order to connect.
Yeah.
It's like I swore off New Year's resolutions a long time ago and decided to actually say like, I'm going to learn how to do something. One year it was like, I'm going to learn how to use Pinterest. But this year I decided, I know it was actually kind of great.
Yeah.
But this year I decided I'm just going to make a word for my year. And so my word for the year was connection. And it was precisely to push me to do what you were just talking about, which is to express my emotions with others, to connect with people, even when it's scary, because I want that. And I've been building, again, back to the, like, it comes from within and then without, like I've really been building connection within, but I want connection in my 3D world. And so I just think it's interesting because we can play that game in our head with like, oh, no, I'm good. I'm going to process all by myself. But the connection is really the goal, right? Like that web that you're putting out, shining your light out in this web and connecting with others is really the goal.
Yeah. And spirit always reminds me, with any kind of vulnerability, we always risk being rejected, but we also risk being loved more deeply. And that is what I have actually found more often than not in speaking my truth, because because even in the risking being loved more deeply, even if a relationship has ended as a result of being vulnerable, I've loved myself more deeply in that moment. And I think that's where we don't always give enough credit to, like, it really is a win-win, because you're either loving yourself more deeply or you're bringing this deeper, more authentic, loving connection to whomever you're in relationship with.
It's interesting because through this process, and I work with this galactic council, and their message is you are loved and you are loved. Just plain and simple. You are loved and you are loved. And, they always say you teach what you need to learn, and I think that's really, especially in this lifetime for me, this is what I've needed to learn. And what I'm learning actively, right, is that I am loved and that I am love and can give love. And that's going back to like why I got to this point where I couldn't not share, because that's their message. And I really think everyone needs to know that. Everyone needs to know you're loved. Someone, somewhere, you are loved. Maybe not everyone, right? Like, we're not going to resonate with everyone. That's fine. But you're worthy of love. You're worthy of giving love. You're worthy of receiving love. Just love, love, love all around is what I need, what I've needed to learn. And it's so true that, so even in those moments where you were vulnerable, or where I was vulnerable and got, that pushed back in my face, it did help me create a deeper relationship with me and spirit, and, uncovering those areas of fear or doubt and letting them go. Like, I survived it. I'm still okay. And I'm okay with myself and how I behaved in a certain situation too.
Which is amazing, right? Like, when we can bring that level of self-acceptance into our interactions. And I forget who said this. It's totally not mine, so I can't take credit for it. But I remember seeing something on the gram that was like, if you're everyone's cup of tea, you're not being authentic, because you're not meant to be everybody's cup of tea. You're your own flavor of tea, and your right people are going to find you. And every time that I'm, worried about not being liked or being rejected or whatever these codependent, deep people-pleasing fears, that surface, I bring myself back to that. Like, I don't want to be everybody's cup of tea. In fact, I really want to be terminally unique, like that is really something that I feel deeply. Like, I don't want to be like other people. And yet there is so much pressure and subconscious belief that drives us to just want to fit in. Cause I think it's human nature to want to belong. I mean, I think that is one of the deepest human needs. So it makes sense that we would all on some level feel like we need to compromise ourselves so we can meet that basic need. But that's never the way to do it, because we got to belong to ourselves.
Yeah. And that's been a lifelong journey for me, really.
Yeah.
And it's exciting to see the growth over the last few years from really digging in and learning who I am and learning that it's okay to express that. And, you had mentioned earlier, like, this has only been over the last few years, but it's like skyrocket,
It sounds like it.
I feel like a completely different person, and it's exciting to see where things go. And I've always been a planner, especially because I can feel change coming so early. Then I start trying to like
figure it out.
Yeah. Like, can I have like the map and the spreadsheet and the budget and everything, right? And it's starting to get to that place where I'll be okay. I don't know what's coming, but I'll be okay. Like, not only will I be okay because I'm competent and I have skills, but I'll be okay because I'm starting to learn that spirit's always got me. And, it's interesting that even though I didn't grow up in a family that talked about all this stuff, and I didn't even really grow up in a religious family, although we did go to Sunday school, really more as a social thing, but I've always had faith because my mom has always said, well, someone's looking out for us. Another sign, someone's looking out for us. And even just that little phrase, I think as a kid, it made me always believe something bigger was looking out for me.
I love that.
Yeah, I kind of like got the dots together on that a few years ago. Like, oh, this level of faith that I have comes from that, from just my mom always saying we're blessed and someone's looking out for us. And now, as I just love symbols, and it's like, and then I see the hawk, and then I see the angel letters, and then I was just talking about this, and here it is. And, all those lovely synchronicities that spirit does for us. It's just more validation that we're always being cared for. We're always being looked out for. And so as long as we keep practicing that connection and keep not putting our head in the sand,
right,
we'll be okay.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. crazy. I feel like I keep being told to tell this story. I don't even know how it fits in.
Tell it.
So when my life totally blew up when I was going through my divorce, I moved out. I was in a condo and I really wanted to still move back to the neighborhood that I had been living in. I had been called to that place. I had loved it. I wanted my kids to live there. And economically, it did not make any sense. There was no way in my mind, like there was no way that I could afford this on my own, single mom, one income in this, nice neighborhood, buying a house in Southern California. Like, are you crazy? Right? Is kind of how I was. And so every night, my kids and I would imagine what we wanted and the feeling of it, right? Like, I want to feel safe and I want light and I want to be happy. And I would envision it kind of in the area, and we would pray to the angels and we would say, Archangel Michael, please fly over San Diego, help us find our perfect house, that's the highest good for all. And we would just put it out there. And I did. And it doesn't make any sense because this market is crazy and it just doesn't add up. I mean, even my sister will say, like, nobody believes me when I tell them that you bought a house in this time at this price in this neighborhood. Like, what? And I walked into the house. I didn't even want to come see it, but I was like, fine. I walk into the house and it immediately felt like home. Just immediately felt like home. And I was like, I don't know what I had to do, but this is my house.
Yeah.
It has this amazing huge tree in the front that we call our fairy tree, and we make fairy gardens underneath it. And I do intention prayers around it with fairy chains. And it's just magical. It's a magical place. And it didn't make any sense, but here I am.
So I can tell you how this all connects. The story makes perfect sense. And this is, I feel like Spirit is just like teeing the opportunities up perfectly. Thank you, Spirit. Because first of all, one of the last questions I usually wrap up with are, how do magic and miracles play out in your life? What a magical story, right? And this is it, right? Like when we focus on what we want and let go of how it all needs to come together, Spirit can work magic and miracles in our life, which is exactly what you're talking about. But I feel like that story is such a beautiful culmination of everything that you talked about, which is as you focus on yourself, as you develop your own conscious awareness, as you stay faithful, as you stay trusting, as you surrender, to how Spirit is going to make all of this happen, this is literally what unfolds.
I 100% agree. And it's, I will walk out to my car to grab something and turn around and be like, I'm so grateful. This is beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm so happy. Like, I am so blessed. I cannot believe that this happened. And it's been a couple years now, but still, it's magic. And there's, magic happens in my life literally every single day, partially because I feel like, because I acknowledge it, I get so enthusiastic when I see any sort of connection. It just feeds me. And so it's all day long, every day. I could tell you a synchronicity or a something where I go, okay, there, thank you. You're with me. I get it.
That's amazing. The other thing I keep being guided to talk about is this message I got. They keep flashing me to a message I got yesterday in my journal, which was about really challenging anything that you believe can or cannot happen. And it's so connected to your story about the house, right? Because all logic would probably have you believe that you could not get that house in that neighborhood at a price at fill in the blanks, right? And this is how our minds limit our experience and how we tie Spirit's hands, because they can work such magic and miracles, but we gotta get rid of all of these beliefs that sabotage what we're trying to create.
And that's really a message for me too right now, because as much as I do have faith, I'm a full on total, like fully committed believer. And I'm still me. I'm still human, right?
Human.
With all my limitations that I have in my brain. And, they're saying, right? I'm hearing them go, yeah, the 555 transformation is upon you. I don't know what that is. And what I'm being reminded is to just keep giving it up to Spirit. Whatever you have for me, guide me. I will walk through that door because it keeps getting better and better.
And that is a message for me too. This is wild.
Right. It's crazy because I have this sense that whatever this thing is, that this door that's they're working on, they're orchestrating in the background is going to be an unexpected turn, right? I don't know when, I don't know what. There's going to be an unexpected turn for the better. And I just have to have the faith to walk through it.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's a to be continued.
Totally. We'll have to follow up on the flip side to be like, okay, here's the other side of this transformation. And here's what happened.
And then on the other thing, because they're showing me too, like they show me lots of stuff and I don't always take them up on it. Like, really want me to do that? No. Okay, I'll think about it. Right? I'll get like just these little flashes and, oh, is that something I should be working on? And what they also always remind me is there's no right, there's no wrong. If you need to experience it, it'll come back. You're not missing the boat. If you needed 3 years to do something that we were going to give you in a month, okay, your choice, right? That's our free will. Or, that there's that, they keep showing me that picture of that like roller coaster on fire. And it's like, it's that meme, like my spirit guides. I don't even remember what it's called. But
right. There's like two people in the front of the roller coaster and like one's got their arms up and then their little boy's like eyes are bugging out of his head. And it's like, right. Like you're on the ride, like, oh my gosh, me and our spirit guides are like arms up and we're terrified. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's not going to be without moments of uncertainty and fear and holy guacamole, is this really happening? Yeah. Or, oh my gosh, what just happened? Right. But I feel like over the last few years, I've learned I'm here for it.
And it's always unfolding with total perfection that I'm always amazed at, honestly, how, like your mind can't even make up the perfection with which they roll out these lessons and experiences for us.
It's pretty amazing.
So how can my audience support you?
So I have a website, Catherine Ann Energy. That's where I have a calendar for sessions. I offer Akashic Records readings, just straight intuitive sessions, which is kind of like connecting with my, my guides and your energy and whatever comes. Tarot sessions, any given day. Sometimes there's chakra readings on there. Sometimes there's mediumship stuff on there. It's just kind of like what I'm guided to do to turn on and off. So there's that. I also can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, all at Catherine Ann Energy. And I also have that Galactic Council. It's the Andromedan Council. So I have a Facebook and an Instagram, and I actually post their channeled messages on my YouTube channel, the Catherine Ann Energy. So any of those places you can find me, even just to hear what's coming up. Those are the places where I share messages from spirit. Sometimes I do tarot spreads, just kind of whatever. I actually ask them, when something comes up that I feel like is for the collective, I say, and where am I sharing this? And they tell me.
Perfect. And we will include all of that information in the show notes so listeners can easily find it. And I am just so grateful that you took the time to come on to have this conversation. And what I really want to just like wrap up with is demonstrating to people, or at least pointing out to people, that this is a normal conversation that we would have in everyday life. Like, this is not a podcast episode. This is genuinely how we communicate with one another and how spirit works through us for each other on any given day. We're constantly giving messages for each other, whether we're aware that it's a message for someone else or not, just by way of the conversations we have. We're just bringing more conscious awareness to, oh, I need to pay attention to that. Oh, that's a message for me. I've done a whole podcast episode on that. Oh, that's a message for me. Oh, that's a message for me. And I love that listeners can now see that this is what I mean by that. This is how a conversation like that really plays out, because every single moment, every single experience we have is purposeful. And this was such a beautiful demonstration of that. So thanks for being part of it.
Oh, thank you, Lindsay. It's so much fun. I mean, really, it's just fun, right?
It is.
This is fun. And I feel so fortunate and lucky to be able to have this conversation with you. And, I listen to your podcast with my kids and they make connections. It's fun. I love
that. Just warms my heart. It's so awesome. These little guys are coming in so awake and they like get it. It's amazing to me, because if I heard this content when I was the age of your kids, it would have been going right over my head, but they're coming in with a knowing. Like, it's amazing. Not that we maybe didn't, but I was so disconnected from it that I didn't know, but they do.
It's really beautiful. And, like I said before, I didn't have this framework because it just wasn't taught talked about.
Yeah.
So now like they're going to do with it what they will, but it's nice that they have the framework,
Yeah.
you know, this is a conversation, and that openly talking about how guided and connected we all are is a really awesome thing.
It is. Every other word out of my mouth. It's like, spirit said this, spirit said this. It's like, does anyone besides spirit talk to you?
I usually say, so I got a nudge.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm aware it feels like a drinking game. Like every time she says spirit, like bottoms up, you know, which I am not promoting, but it like literally comes out of my mouth that many times. I'm like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. But that's fun. I love it.
It is. Well, thank you again. This has been amazing. And we'll see everyone next time. Thank you so much for listening to the Guided Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I would be so grateful if you would share it with a friend or even leave me a review so we can ensure that it makes its way into the ears of listeners who need to hear these messages most. Until next time, may you remember how guided you truly are.